This video is going to show you a solo Grandmaster Nightfall getting platinum rank for the Battlegrounds GM, which this is the first Grandmaster Nightfall of Season of the Witch, which it is on Europa. This isn't as bad as it sounds. In actual fact, I actually quite enjoyed this Grandmaster, if truth be known about it. Now, I didn't manage to get my full run recorded because the run was longer than 60 minutes, and if you don't do the trick on console, then you'll lose footage if the video is longer than 60 minutes, which my run was. It was an hour and 10 minutes or whatever it was. So the first 10 minutes is cut off, so I do apologise about that, but all you've missed is me killing a barrier and a couple of enemies at the very start, the strike. The reason why this starting section is so long is because it's so dense. Really all you want to be doing is sitting back with Wishender, really, anyways, to be honest. Use plenty of heavy, because in Battleground GMs, which I think what they've done with Battlegrounds is that Bungie understands they're not a regular GM, so they give you more heavy as a result of balancing it. Does that still justify them? Some of them yes, some of them no. I think this GM in particular is alright. What's sweetened the deal, if I'm being honest, is the fact that you can get Warden's Law from it, which is a fantastic hand cannon in the game at the minute. So it is a sweetener, if I'm being honest. But obviously we're on Night Stalker because it's our first clear of this GM, so you always sort of want to test out the waters to see the enemy spawns and stuff. You won't learn nothing if you die at the start of the strike, because then you'll be kicked to orbit. So I wanted my first clear for this GM to be, as I say, a Night Stalker run. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. If anything, if you want to farm the hand cannon, you shouldn't be farming it solo anyways. I don't recommend that you do it. I won't be farming it solo. Why would you farm it solo? That's going to be what, 60 minutes per gun? Pointless. Just farm it in a team. Just LFG it. But if you want to get a solo clear on it, then this is a consistent way of doing it. Like I say, spam your heavy, because every time there's a heavy crate up, which in room 1 there is, you'll max your heavy out. So we're just going to spam our heavy on these Arc Shield Wrathborn enemies, because they can be quite annoying. Now the loadout is Wishender, Solar Fusion, Cartesian Coordinate, and Sailspy Pitchglass, a arc linear, which it's just generally an all-round a good linear fusion. I highly recommend a linear for this because of just in general you're fighting so far away from the enemies that you may as well run a linear. A machine gun would work, I think, alright as well, to be honest. Like a high impact, maybe 7 Seraph Saw type deal, or the Void Raid LMG would work out alright, but I think a linear is the way to go. So the fusion's very important. I highly recommend a fusion. If you want to use Emerite, you can. And I know I'm maybe going to sound hypocritical a little bit, because I did call the Emerite the most powerful fusion in the game, yet I'm not using it. Why? Well, because the role of the Emerite is a boss killing machine weapon. Its usability, or it loses points when you're trying to like solo something like a GM, because your whole thing to do with the GM, the solo, is to make sure that you're staying alive and killing enemies efficiently. And Cartesian's going to be slightly better on the usability side. It's rapid fire frame, and yes, total damage on the Emerite's going to be higher, but this isn't a total damage versus DPS test. This is just to see if you can solo something, right? So you'll see lots of videos of tests and this and that and the other. All that stuff doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter for when you're trying to like solo something like this, especially GM strikes. They don't revolve around burst damage or timers or DPS checks. You get yourself confused. People get themselves confused with that. You don't need to think about it like that when you're doing this. If I was doing a solo dungeon, however, right, it's a little bit different. There is DPS checks, especially Ghost of the Deep. So things change. But a couple of people have asked me recently about fusions, what the best fusion is. The answer is try not to keep comparing fusions together, but think of it more as a fusion that fits a job role. So Cartesian Coordinate is going to be an all-rounder fusion for you. It'll be really good DPS, right? Especially if it's a Vorpal weapon version. Mine's got slideways, so it's got that extra utility. Obviously, you can get lead from gold on it. But it's going to be really good for GMs, just because of the fact it can stun a shield quicker than what Emerite can, right? So Cartesian Coordinate's an all-rounder fusion, going to do everything quite well, but not as good as the Emerite for DPS, not as well as Loaded Question may be for DPS, for example. So the answer isn't, do I just have a Loaded Question or do I just have an Emerite? That's not the answer. The answer is that you have every one god roll. That's why I run a stocked vault. That's why my vault's always full, because you need to have a god roll of each version of the gun. You don't just stick to one gun and say, this is my fusion, I'm not using any other fusion, I'm only using Tachyon Force. Well, you're at a loss, because that's bad mindset. So I'm trying to say, like, you want a god roll for every single fusion, not just one of them. And I know people don't like grinding rolls and they'll stick to just one fusion and say, right, this is my fusion. You can't play like that, especially if something comes up where you do need to have a particular type of fusion because of whatever reason. In this GM, there are 20 champs, I believe, from what I've counted in total. I think so. But the footage, you did miss 10 minutes of the footage, so I can't remember in the first room if there was 2 barriers or 3. I'm convinced there was 2, with a bunch of arc barriers, arc boomers. So 20 champions in total. This is getting on towards glassware level of champs. There's a lot of champs in this, right? This particular room in general is one of the easier rooms. Room 2, I'll refer it to as. We've got a debuff here as well. It's to be noted, the 2 main artifact mods that you need to have on if you're going to solo this, you need Rapid Fire Ranger and Semi-Auto Striker. Rapid Fire Ranger will debuff the enemy. Semi-Auto Striker will give you an armor charge on your left hand side, which therefore procs kinetic, the kinetic surge, because I've got kinetic surge on the boots. It is arc surge and strand surge, I believe. I'm using a void class. I don't think I'm going to get the kinetic buff. Who knows if it even works still? I don't have a clue. But I'm still getting benefit here from using a kinetic surge. So I've got double kinetic surge and a scav on my boots. It just means when we're sitting from a back like this, when we're taking enemies from that 40 meter radius, we've got a buff and a debuff at the same time, meaning that Wish End is even more potent, more powerful than it ever has been. Maybe I can't. Well, we have had Sunder and Clay in the past, but I can't mind if Wish Ender was a thing back then in terms of power. But I don't know if it was. I can't mind. But literally, as I say, this is making it very easy to deal with champions from a distance. To be honest with you, champions aren't the issue in this GM. From my game time, from my play time in the GM, which is very short because it's literally been out 1 day, right? So what do you expect? Can only have so many hours played in it. From what I've seen, the most difficult thing in the GM, I think, is wizards. I think it's wizards. It's definitely wizards for me. Because let's face it, they're hard to crit, they're hard to stun. You can stun them, but it can be a nightmare. And there's 3 ultra wizards that you're going to have to take out coming up. So, which as I say, I'll go over that when we get to that particular room. We are facing 2 unstoppable champions from a distance here. Now, I haven't got Unstoppable Scout on. I've got Unstoppable Fusion on, so I'm having to make the fusion work. So the fusion's going to do no damage. But that doesn't matter because the fusion is going to be so good for you at the final boss that it's overwhelmingly better than a scout rifle to run. It's just as simple as that. And I'll prove it when we get to the boss if you don't believe me. If you think, well, no, I'll use the scout. Well, the pro to using a scout with Wish Ender is that you'll get inherently more heavy. But it doesn't matter. It's a battleground strike. You're going to get plenty of heavy anyways because there's plenty of boxes to pick. And there seems to be some sort of There seems to be something where there's more ammo dropping in Battleground GMs. I feel that. If I went and played Lightblade, I wouldn't be getting as much heavy ammo as this. Not that I can play Lightblade right now because the GM node's not up. I'm just saying there's plenty of ammo dropping in this. So I'd rather do primary special heavy for that fact. Heavy's covered. I'm getting plenty of heavy. We don't need to worry about it. What we do need to worry about is wizards at the boss and the free ultra wizards in the room coming up, because they're a nightmare to deal with. That was the most difficult room for me from what I found. So with Battleground or heists or whatever you're going to call them, every time there's a certain section where you come and there's 2 streakers and there's a ultra acolyte that sets off the alarm or whatever, right? I don't even know what the name of this is. A Death Tongue moves to the channel of Ziva or Raf's battle song. There you go. So this section, every time, you've got to clear out the major and you will get debuffed when the acolyte gets to the zone. I feel as though this mechanic is really unfair, especially in GMs, because, I mean, it's not unfair on this one, because you're fighting from all the way up here and you can just melt, well, you can't melt, but you can chip away at the acolyte's HP, so I'm fine with it in this one. But for example, in Mars, it's really unfair, the mechanic, because essentially you can't use your melee ability or your grenade, and I don't think you can use your super either. But you can use a class ability. How weird that is. I don't know why. So our invisibility build would be nerfed if I went down there. But I found out that it's actually pretty safe to go down there once all the snipers are taken out, even when you're debuffed with this overwhelming battle song mechanic, right? You can't double jump, which thank God for that. Like, imagine you couldn't double jump when you're debuffed, because there's certain debuffs in the game that like don't let you double jump, like Weight of Darkness, for example. That isn't a thing, so you can still jump, which is good. But down below me, there's lots of cover in this GM, which is why I quite like this GM, because it gives the player half a chance to play the damn strike. There's lots of cover everywhere, which is, it's funny because this is a social space. Well, not a social space, but it's on Europa. But you can actually explore this zone in patrol. But funnily enough, it works well as a strike, and that's actually by luck, because this wasn't made to be a strike. But funnily enough, this whole zone, the path going down, the ships going above your head, funnily enough, it's actually themes the strike really well. And like I said to you, I think it's the best Battleground strike we've had. I know some people are saying, oh, it's the easiest Battleground GM we have. Like, who's keeping tabs to that level? It's the easiest Battleground GM. What a ridiculous statement. So what? Like, at the minute, it's fun, and there's a hand cannon to farm off it. People can at least play the damn strike, and it's not like Mars, although Mars might be a little bit easier from what it was when it first came out, the Mars GM. But honestly, like, you've got to realise that there's a generous amount of skill set of players playing the game. It's not just your top 1%ers. There is, you know, more casual players playing. If they just stick on Wishender, 3 Wishenders in a fire team, they'll get this GM done easy enough. The only issue probably would be the boss fight, because if you're not using the exploit, then you've really got to take your time with it and not melt the boss down, which I'll talk about when we get to the boss fight himself. We're still debuffed. This acolyte is not pushing. See, there's a little mechanic in the game where if the enemies are thinner in a pack, right, so we started off with snipers and stuff, we took all those out. The acolyte doesn't want to push me anymore because there's no enemies to support him, so he's de-aggroed. This enemy is de-aggroed. The only way to re-aggro him would be to confront him, to get closer. So I'm going to cut my losses on the 6 shots, because I was wanting to really spend 6 shots, then pick up crate. I can't do that because this damn acolyte is hiding. So we're going to push up a little bit. Notice now all the enemies are aggroed on me, right? We'll spam some linear on this knight here, because it was critical to kill that knight, because the barrier, there's going to be a barrier champ that's going to push me to my left. But I want to debuff this Acolyte. Right, I can't believe how slow he walks when you debuff him. I know that the Rapid Fire Ranger does debuff all enemies, but it just seems like they're debuffed even more. Like some of them are just, they're almost walking like they're slowed from stasis, which is nice. Like I say, this barrier I can see he's using cover. He's smart, right? Imagine if barriers had updated AI, how much of a nightmare there would be. Because I'm going to try and melt here, but he's going to sidestep behind that piece of cover. There you go. Perfect play there by him. So I'm going to have to move to another platform, which there's less cover on this platform, but there's more angle to kill the champ. So we'll take him from here. But if you're going to do this strafe left and right, you need to learn the playstyle of GMs when you're playing with a bow. Now, I already know that because since Forsaken, I've been playing around with bows. And when GMs came out, the first season that Grandmaster Nightfalls came out, bows were like the top pick, the top primary to use. Not an exotic primary, it was just a standard legendary bows. More to the point, generally an explosive payload one. So ever since 2019, bows have been the best primaries in the game. But now it's even amplified even more than that, because Wishender is 40% better than any other bow. I haven't tried out the Iron Banner bow with Control Burst, but I can't imagine it being better than this bow, because Control Burst is 20%. Even though it is an interesting bow, I couldn't be bothered farming Iron Banner just to roll the dice to get that bow, even though I know that it is good. But deal with the Unstoppable first, because the Unstoppable also has range. His attack has a range drop-off, just like you have range drop-off. So we're what? We've got to be 70 meters away from him, right? He can't attack us here, but if I was to push up to that next platform, he starts doing his void attack. Why put up with his void attack when we can just kill him from here? So don't push up. It makes a massive impact in the order on how you kill champions in certain GMs. And this one, I felt like that was the case at times. There was two snipers to the left. I think I've took them out already. Make sure you deal with them, because they also have range drop off, and they will start to snipe from this radius. Because I know, because on my previous run they were. So make sure you deal with them right away, because you don't want snipers up at all. Because snipers, the way they work in GMs, you get hit far too hard off snipers. They are only arc and solar threat is on, but that doesn't matter. Always prioritize a sniper. Even a sniper is always more important to deal with than a barrier. Try to isolate barriers away from snipers and difficult enemies like that. This boomer we left till last because he hides. He's a nuisance, so we'll get him at the end, which is now. You'll get a checkpoint update to say the door's open. Make sure you get that. If it hasn't procced, there's some ad hiding. It could be an invisible marauder, it could be an acolyte. Even one acolyte can give you trouble if they start shooting you in the back and you don't notice. These lasers one-shot you. Do not get hit by the lasers. Shoot the mine, then go invis immediately. For some reason, the double barriers spawn in this room. I don't know if that's intended. Looks like it is intended, but it's kind of an unfair mechanic. I can imagine that little bit could wipe a full team, because you wouldn't expect two barriers just to sort of teleport right in that room. And the thing about it is, if you don't deal with them barriers in that room, which it's really impossible to do that, to be honest, because they do solar damage and solar threats on. So the barriers then mingle with the next room, and there's loads of other barriers in that room. There's actually 5 barriers in that next room. And 3 ultra wizards. This was the hardest room for me. This was actually harder than the boss. I was actually getting a little bit annoyed by this section. But you learn as you do, you know, when you get your first clear, you learn so much. So on your next clear or on your next fire team run, you've learned so much from that initial clear that the next run isn't a problem to you, because you've went through the trials and tribulations on your first clear. And my first clear was a solo clear, which is good. It's always good to do that. Because then when you do LFG or do play with your clanmates for the GM, you'll be able to know exactly everything because you've soloed it then. So pretty much learned, you know, everything there is to learn about it for the most part. So there's 2 heavy shanks as well. Right, so this is how I would say that you should do it. Deal with the 4 hive barrier champions first. Now you're going to be able to get some good debuffs. Wishen is going to do a lot of work for you here. You don't even need to spam heavy. It's that good. So, I mean, you can spam it here and there, but for the most part, these barriers want to attack you. They don't want to de-aggro. They may sometimes twirl around the corner, or do their hunter dodge around the corner. Sometimes, but for the most part, they're aggroed on you. And the reason being is because when you go to that Clovis room, right, there's ads everywhere, which is good in a sense, because the barriers want to push. If there was no enemies in there, the barriers would want to hide, because they're threatened by you. But they're not threatened by you now, because there was 2 solar shanks, 3 solar ultra wizards, tons of orange bar acolytes. There's tons of enemies there, so the barriers is the first port of call. The problem, what happens is though, if you deal with the 4 barrier champions first, the fallen barrier will de-aggro on you. You could get round this by killing the fallen barrier first. The problem with that is that you might have 1 or 2 barrier hive champs shooting at you while you try and do that. So I would just maybe cut your losses with the fallen one, leave him, because he'll just keep, honestly, he'll just keep going behind cover, and instead just deal with the 4 barriers. Once you've dealt with the 4 barriers, right, then you can start to work with the room a little bit. What you also need to realize is there's a spawn of enemies. The battleground spawns are very interesting and quite complex compared to any compared to any strike, apart from maybe Glassware and Lightblade. Those 2 GMs in particular, my health there was really low. That was actually Void Resist saved us there. Before I was just about to say what I was going to say, Void Resist actually saved us. So, oh no, we didn't have Void Resist on. Hang on, we had Solar Resist and Arc Resist and Concussive Dampener. So actually it didn't matter either way, but we were close. Make sure your strafing is better than that, and that you're a little bit more patient than what I was, because in this particular run I don't think I was playing as patient as I should. It was this room that was actually like pissing me off a little bit, because these heavy shanks, they'll just rotate left and right constantly, so you've got to try and put yourself out there to keep that damage before that shield comes up. We've already got the right one though, so we're nearly done. I would recommend me even using heavy. When the shield's down, whip out the fusion and do a couple of linear fusion shots, because those heavy shanks, as I say, you want to get those down before you even start to go any closer than what we are right now. We'll go with an Invis, which the invisibility build, which I haven't even had a chance to mention, is Graviton Forfeit, with it being the best Invis build in the game for solo. Right, well, it's between that and 6 Coyote. Omnioculus has its play style, but Omnioculus is better for team, because how Omnioculus used to work is that if you smoked your enemies, you would also get smoke energy from smoking, not enemies, but your teammates. You would get smoke off that as well. The Graviton Forfeit build, if you run a T10, I've actually got a T9 strength. I couldn't be bothered putting it to T10. I just kept it with T9, which was enough. It was enough to do, but my ability stat was a little bit lower than what I liked, but it didn't matter too much. As long as you've got, as I say, a T9, T10 strength stat with Graviton Forfeit, then you're good. You're going to get 12 seconds of Invis. Right, so the only thing is my discipline stat was really good, which did help me out. I think I was a T9 discipline, which is kind of good with double bomber. So every time we're dodging, we're farming some nade energy, and nades are handy in this. I see a couple of people run suppressor grenade. It's not my playstyle to ever run suppressor. I don't really like it. My playstyle is always to have a damage style of nade, unless I'm playing Solar 3.0. If I'm playing Solar 3.0, okay, I'll run heal and nade. for the most part. But whenever I'm playing Void, I always just either use Void Wall or the Vortex. But I generally like Vortex a little bit better than Void Wall, because Void Wall, even though it does more damage, but it's harder to use, and the enemies avoid your nade far easier than what they do with Vortex. So we're going to actually do a Trapper's Ambush on the wizard, right, to suppress him, and then do solar fusion rifle shots. The problem was the wizard fell off the platform. See, there's a left wizard, a top mid wizard, and then top right. These three wizards like to stay in those zones. So that wizard on that platform will always stay on that platform unless he falls off. He hasn't got feet to fall off, but you know what I mean. So it's the wizard on the left you want to deal with first. This is how I ended up doing it, because it was quite annoying, this bit. There's a lot of cover on left, right? Actually, I end up dealing with the left wizard first, but I'm actually doing some damage here because this wizard's a half HP. But I end up taking the left and the mid wizard at the same time. I end up getting a double finisher kill, which you'll see. But this is what I'm saying. On this left-hand side, you've got a lot of cover here. Use Unstoppable Fusion to stun the wizard, which will give you some stun shots, but not like... it won't be perfect. You won't be able to melt the wizard in one mag, for example. This is why the fusion's on. Like, a scout rifle would give me no benefit here. Don't get me wrong, Wish Ender would do nice damage from range, but we're on Invis anyways, so we may as well, as I said, deal with it like this. This was actually a bad play here. I didn't have my dodge or my smoke. That was okay, because once you, I think it must be time based now that I'm thinking about it. It must be time based for Curse Thrall and Thrall to come out, because I thought that was actually linked to killing a wizard, but we haven't killed one. So I'm sort of figuring out things as I'm re-watching this back. Alright, because I'm not going to watch an hour run to then do an hour commentary on it, because then that's 2 hours wasted, when I could just do commentary and watch it at the same time. It is my first clear, you know, so it isn't going to be perfect commentary either. So that's what I'm saying. You take down the shield on the wizard, they hide. That's just what shielded enemies always do. That's what makes it a little bit annoying. It cost me a lot of time. It was probably an extra 5 to 7 minutes extra worth of messing around with these wizards. Your tether's really useful, which I'm going to decide to tether this wizard on the left now. So we'll get a stun first. The wizard may go left and right. We need to make sure that we hit our tethers. The wizard's went somewhere. I don't know what's gone on. But I think the wizard is finishable, which that's the goal, because I've got the aspect on to finish these wizards. That aspect you need to have. I would say that you must put that on. Persistence. Right, I'll have a dim link. Can't mind all the fragments, names and everything. But the finisher one, when you finish an enemy, you go invis. Your persistence, you make your invisibility go last longer. You need that on with Graviton. But those mods especially are going to help you out. So I've got both wizards finishable. There's still a fallen champ up. What I've noticed, right, which shocked me, is these fallen champs are not tethering enemies. Now, I don't know why that is. Is that because a fallen champ can't tether a hive enemy? Is that why? Because that is strange that this fallen barrier isn't tethering enemies, but it's also strange that it's just one fallen barrier and everything else is hive. I know it's Wrathborn enemies, so they are a faction of enemies, I guess, or whatever, but it's just so weird. In actual fact, it's good. I don't want the barrier tethering the wizards, because that would be an absolute nightmare then. Then you have to confront the barrier and do all that stuff. I did not notice these acolytes, so that was close to a wipe there. Not realising that those acolytes were alive. If Empath was on, the modifier Empath, I would have been dead there probably, if I'd been meleeed. So we'll take out the rest of these acolytes. A good thing that you can do is scope the area out as well. Is like, before you confront the wizard, when you start to do your solar fusion damage, maybe scope the area out first, because you have unlimited invis here, obviously, and then just see if there's any adds up. If there isn't, then you can start to do with the wizard. The barrier has now completely de-aggroed, and isn't rotating left and right because there's no enemies up. So we'll deal with the barrier, and now we've just got one wizard left. We're 40 minutes in. It's a long run, but it is Battlegrounds. And then we'll just, as I say, do our damage. Like I say, Cartesian's doing a fantastic job of dealing with these wizards, which it's a wizard, it's a weapon that is good for solar wizards. Emerite would not be good for this because it's not built for, like, it's built to have a large mag and do high damage to a boss. That's what it's built to do. Cartesian, if Cartesian Coordinate came with Control Burst, I told someone this the other day, if they come with Control Burst, if it was craftable, then Cartesian Coordinate would definitely be the best solar fusion in the game, hands down, apart from maybe Merciless. So it's not craftable. It's like, well, why is it not craftable? There's a lot of guns that should be craftable but aren't. But they're slowly, see what they're doing with the crafting system is they're slowly adding all these weapons, but they're so grindy to get. But when I heard that the crafting weapon system was coming in the game before Witch Queen, I was expecting our menus to be updated and stuff for every single weapon, and that you can craft them and you can have access to all the perks in your menu and look at it and sort of craft every weapon in the game. I thought it would have updated everything, but it didn't work like that. It's almost like you've got random rolls and crafting as two separate systems in the game, and it's kind of odd because you can't, like, craft Nightfall weapons, but you can craft seasonal weapons. You can't craft Trials of the Cyrus weapons, but you can craft raid weapons. It's a weird system, I think. I still think it's weird, the whole crafting thing. I do enjoy it when a good weapon comes along and that you need to craft that weapon, but I still think it's a little odd. Like, we need to come to the stage where every weapon can be craftable. And I know people have said, well, we don't want every weapon craftable. But you should, because there's some people that do cling on to a certain weapon type that other people don't. Like, imagine crafting Banana in SR4. The old 2017 Scout rifle. Most people won't even know what that Scout is. This section here, we're just skipping it. So the way to do that is just to have the timer be removed. I could have picked up 2 artifacts and melted the rings, whatever, right? The thing is, though, if you do this, you get an extra champion. So, do you get a champion if you shoot the runes with the artifact? I don't think you do. But I wonder if we spawn in an extra champ, this means that you could skip a champ at the boss. So if you didn't know, a lot of GMs you can skip a champ. That would need tested. I wouldn't test that on a solo, though. But it would be a waste of time. But because there's only one champion at the boss, right? But I'm just wondering if he's skippable. Because he could totally be skippable, and I'm wondering if you could still get platinum rank, because there are inconsistencies with platinum ratings, you know, across all the GMs. But we don't get ammo as well. If you don't successfully stop the Wrathborn or whatever, you don't get an ammo crate. That doesn't matter, because we're max ammo anyways. We're not literally spamming our heavy to that degree anyway. So, I don't know, like I say, if you spawn him in just like I did, so fail it on purpose, kill barrier, and then skip this one. I don't know. If anyone knows that, they can let us know. That's important information. So this is showing you the exploit. I'm sure you probably saw it now because there's a couple of solo people who solo GMs have shown you this already. There's not like 100 runs, bear in mind. There's only just a handful of solo GMs currently on YouTube. But it's a nice little find, whoever actually found it originally. But basically, activate the switch, and then you need to jump on that entrance thing, right? But there's sort of 2 levels to it. You need to be on the highest level of that door, way, whatever it is, that structure, and then you need to jump up here. Now, if you've got really low mobility, you might miss your jump. The jump before this, the run before this, I missed my jump and fell off map and lost 40 minutes for no reason because I fell off map trying to get up here. So make sure your mobility is quite high. My mobility was actually really bad on this build because, as I say, I rushed putting my build together. I rushed everything really just because I really wanted just to get a clear done as soon as, rather than messing about too much in orbit. So you can literally just debuff the boss, obviously with Rapid Fire Ranger, build up your armor charges, and this is where you do DPS from, but you need to understand the rules. With exploits like this, I've done a lot of them, especially with bosses, and I do quite like a good boss exploit. We've had loads. What have we had? Scarlet Keep, Warden and Nothing. There's so many. The thing, though, about it is you need to understand the rules of the exploit, which I did test initially on a standard strike. When the boss does his one-shot attack, or where the void orbs spin in the air and they start to track you, I recommend you do a Trapper's Invis dodge, or a smoke, because this will stop the darts at tracking you, and this means that there isn't a chance that there's a less chance of death. You can die here. The wizard is a factor, wizards that spawn, which basically for the amount of HP you take off the boss, you get a mini spawn of adds. So by the time you get to half HP, there's quite a lot of adds up because you've just done half damage to the boss. I'm speeding up this footage, by the way, just to speed up the video. When the boss is half HP, the boss goes away, right? So this then gives you 3 time with just you and the adds. There's 2 snipers spawn up top right of the map. You need to take those out first. This exploit as well, this tube thing, you can sort of get stuck. And if you get stuck and you can't invis with your dodge, because you can be locked, just be careful of that. That's why it's better to do a trapper's ambush, because you jump in the air and then smoke. Whereas if you try and dodge on here, you might fall off map as well. So I don't recommend it. Try and just limit yourself to doing trappers. You don't need that much invis here, only when the boss does his attack, which it seems as though he... I don't know the pattern, to be honest, on the boss. Like, in terms of how often he does his attack. I don't know. I haven't analysed him enough to tell you. But it's basically the boss from Savathûn's Song. That's the boss that you're up against right now. Essentially, it's the same style of boss. But on Savathûn's Song, it was really well structured, the attack, and you knew when it was coming. With this one, I'm not sure when it comes, but it is easy. It is easier to deal with because you're on this exploit zone, of course. So try and take out as many adds as you can. Remember the mechanic I told you about before. When there's not many adds left alive, the remaining adds will hide, so it looks like there's no adds up. But when you confront the adds, all of a sudden they come out of the woodwork, right? There's loads of them now all of a sudden, because you've actually pushed them, which you need to do that because you need to dump 5 batteries to get to phase 2. But there's tons of acolytes and tons of wizards, so you really need to do this like a kill at a time sometimes, depending on how things are. I actually didn't realise, because this was my first time getting to phase 2, that there's 2 arc melee knights with shields. I was worried about these knights because I know on Lightblade they one-shot. I'm going to use a tether here because there's a lot of adds up. At least try and get one of the wizards killed. 1 or 2 if you can. It depends on how they're grouped. You can group them up to some fashion and be patient about it, but really what the strategy revolves around is Cartesian Coordinate comes into full power here. Try not to use Wish Ender much, only on acolytes. What you want to be doing is leaving the arc captains alive, because if you kill them you get a battery, and that battery will go on the floor and you got a 15-second timer to deposit the battery. So don't do that, because the knight will respawn anyways, so you're making work for yourself. So in other words, you need to deal with the wizards and the arc knights, but I would prioritize all wizards. So the strat will be two shots back to back from Cartesian to then get a finisher kill on the wizard and go invis. But you need to evaluate if you can or cannot do that. I've got a healthy finisher on, but a healthy finisher only works when you've got a charge with light. So, you know, shield break charge would have been a good one in this, but shield break charge is +4 on gauntlets, and you need kinetic loader on. So it's kind of like I could have run shield break charge. Actually, thinking about it, that would have been nice, but it's just it costs so much on gauntlets. Less I would have ran it, because think about it. You break the shield, the solar shield or the arc shield, you'll then finish, right, and then you can get some health regen off that finisher kill. If Ad melees you as you finish the wizard, you could die, for example. Whereas healthy finisher would help out a little bit with that. You get spawns of Curse Thrall every now and then. Now it seems to be that every time you dunk, you also get a set of enemies spawn in. But before you even do any of that, I recommend that you just clear the room. Right now, obviously I could have done this quicker. I could have really pushed it and just literally cleared the arc targets. When invis, dunk the battery, do the battery cheese. There's a cheese for the batteries where it revolves around you duping it. I didn't dupe the batteries, to be honest. I didn't dupe them, but you can do that. But imagine you could do that, dupe 5 batteries, then go to exploit zone and then just kill the boss and then skip the final barrier. That's if what I've said earlier is true, if you can skip him and still get platinum. I don't know the answer to the question until I've tested it or someone tells me. But if that is true, then you could actually skip all of these enemies and literally just dunk batteries. And then you could at least skip the acolytes, I would say. As they're not too much of a problem. Their nades are though, because solar threat's on. So when you're sitting in the exploit zone, they can. I've had one acolyte, if I tell the truth, nade me when I've been in the exploit zone. If they don't see you so much, they won't. But once they get a line of sight on you and they've saw you sneak around, they'll keep nading over and over, and that could be a bit of a nightmare. So if you get in that situation, you just need to clear. You just need to kill the acolyte when you're in the exploit zone. If that ends up happening. So now I want to clear out these melee based knights that I had no idea spawn. First time I saw them, really. So we're going to deal some damage. We're half HP. I'm evaluating what to do. So I could have overcommitted there to the knight and just killed him, but there would be a chance of death. And at 56 minutes I wouldn't. On my first clear I wasn't willing to take that risk. Just for a quicker kill on the knight. The knight keeps de-aggroing, which is annoying me. He's hugging the champ for some reason. The champ is the last thing that you will do. Well, second to last. Batteries will be after that. Yeah, don't dunk any batteries until you kill his champ, providing that you have to kill him, which I did on this run. There's a couple of acolytes up. I'm scoping the area out. My invis management is subpar here, but that's on purpose because I was going to come underneath here. So if you don't know, on this side, obviously you've got your 3 targets. They look after each zone. The guy on top can't really hit you too much because you're down here. So look at this zone. It's a really nice place to deal with the barrier. We're going to use Tether here because it's the most useful thing to do. We're going to melt him down with some fusion because we're getting so much ammo to drop, special weapon wise, that it's worth just using your fusion when you need to, or your heavy even. Like I say, it's a Battlegrounds GM. It seems to be that the rules are a little bit different in terms of ammo compared to like a standard GM like Lightblade. Which I thought Lightblade was going to be the GM this week. I don't understand why Lightblade is not the GM. Lightblade was the first GM. Sorry, the first strike, the first Nightfall strike of the season. So I presumed that the first Nightfall GM will be Lightblade. I just assumed that. I probably shouldn't have done, because I was really looking forward to doing a Lightblade for once as well. Because I built up my strat out, I had my hunter built out, my strand hunter, I had everything sorted. and then it came out that it was this GM. There was probably a message notified us that last Friday, but I didn't see it or take note of it. So there's still a few, like I say, you still get wizards up every phase of a dunk that you do. So it is going to slow up the run if you're not doing the battery dupe, where you duplicate the batteries. But it is showing you how to survive. So like I say, it's so consistent that, especially if you're at full HP, because the first shot will break shield. That's why it needs to be a solar fusion, you see, because it will stun the wizard, or should do. The second one will do enough damage to get the wizard finishable, and then you finish. If you do that like that very consistently, there's a low chance of death because of how you're doing it. Which people still think, oh, because match game's gone, you don't need to match shields. You certainly need to still match shields in GMs, because this is a classic example of it. If I ran Loaded Question for this, right, the damage wouldn't be as good, and the stun damage, more to the point, would not be as good, because you wouldn't get the elemental shield break. It's not the damage that it does, it's the stun damage. You don't understand, it's the stun. People don't even really understand what stun damage does in Destiny 2. They don't really understand the mechanic. But enemies can be stunned, right? But GM adds are less likely to be stunned. But if it's an elemental shield break, the law for that is that the enemy will be stunned because you've matched a shield. So that one mechanic, I mean, sometimes that law doesn't work, because that wizard didn't even stun there, if you noticed it. But because of the Coordinate Fusion's rapid fire frame, I can quickly get 2 shots off before the wizard really reacts. We're going to do some linear damage here, just to quickly take out that. We're on the 3rd battery dunk now. So what you can also do is always deal with the same arc shielded target. You have a choice, mid, left or right. Do right side with the raised platform, because he's safer to deal with. He's safer to deal with. There's more cover on that side. Left hand side's got no cover. Not really. I'm going to use a tether here. I think it's well worth to use a tether, because we're never going to use it on the boss. Let's be real. We're not using it on the boss. We would use it on a champ, but the champ's already dead. There's no more champs to spawn in. So anytime you get a tether, use it on a wizard. That is the best spent super right now, because as I say, they're so lethal if you let them take over. Two shots finisher. Slideways is so consistent on this gun. I really do like it. Some people prefer lead from gold, which lead from gold in actual fact would work well in this, on this fusion, but I do still like my slideways, just because it's just so nice just to sort of have it quickly reloaded like that. If you're ever not playing Invis, so you're not planning to use your smoke, play underneath the platform. That's one of your rules. Also, when you're doing your trapper's ambush like that, try and debuff the target. They're not very threatening, even though Solar Threat is on. They don't do much damage to you for some reason, these mages, which is kind of nice. When we dunk, the same thing. You're going to get an extra spawn of enemies. It could be 6 acolytes, 2 or 3 wizards. That's generally what it is. We're on 4 out of 5. Like I said, I could have duped there. Like if I duped the battery, I could have quickly went Invis, went to exploit zone, and then finished boss off. But would it matter? Would you have changed? Would you have watched this video if it was 1 hour 9 minutes or 1 hour 6 minutes? Would that have changed your view on the run? Obviously not. I'm being sarcastic. I'm just saying, like, it's a long run anyways. It's Battlegrounds. But as I said, I don't mind it, because they're offering Warden's Law, literally one of the best hand cannons in the game now. Right? The loot is fantastic this week. So I don't mind them having a Battleground GM up. Although it would be better if there was an easy GM because you could farm it easier. But I'm just saying, when you complete the GM, right? I think I got 2 or 3 Warden's Law. 2 or 3. Which is nice, because if one of them was a god roll, I don't think it was. I checked it dim earlier. I don't think there was a god roll. But if there was, then that's well worth me of doing this, because then I've got a nice hand cannon to have a look at, test, see how good it is and stuff. But if it was like Swarm, because it was Swarm, wasn't it? See, at the start of Reset, it was the machine gun, and they changed the loot. Retroactively, they changed it to hand cannon, and I think they've done that on purpose because they know that this GM's going to be hard. Whereas if it was Lightblade or Devil's Lair, I think they would have just left it as Swarm. But because it's this GM, or any Battleground GM, they've done us a favour and let us have Warden's Law instead. Which was the right play. Whoever decided to do that, that was a good thing. These mages started de-aggro. I watched Vendettas run, the exact same thing happened. After so long of when you're playing around these arc-shielded mages, they will de-aggro and start to shoot the ceiling. I don't know why this is. This is a strange thing, but we'll take it. It's for us. Now, when you dunk the final battery, you've got time before the shield goes down, right, off the boss. So don't invis right away. Invis need when you get to the platform, right, to give yourself plenty of time, because you might fall off and mess the jump up. Well, I hope you don't fall off the map because you've lost your solo GM completion then. But if you fall off just onto the walkway or something, then at least you've got another chance to get up here while invis. If not, then do your vanishing step. But we'll speed up the footage from here. So now, literally, we can kill the boss. Whilst I was doing this run, I was thinking there was going to be another spawn for a barrier champ, but there isn't. I can confirm to you there isn't. There's just that one barrier that spawns midway, which we've already killed him, so he's not a problem. So I could have really sped this last bit up and just literally spam my Wish Ender, my Linear. I've got full heavy here as well. Shoot to loot would work good here. Problem is, Wish Ender doesn't have that. I don't think there's a fusion rifle with shoot to loot. It would be nice, but it'd be hard to fit it in your loadout. And also you can see the visibility of this exploit zone. There isn't a lot of visibility. If he teleports left, he's at danger. Middle, not so much. Middle, not so much. But you need to make sure you don't fall off. That was my biggest worry whilst doing this. That's why I played so passively, because I was just worrying that I was going to fall off map. When there's a wizard up in mid, right, try to deal with the wizard, because that wizard's going to get in your way when you're trying to melt down the boss. Don't overcommit to damage. Always pay attention to your HP when you're DPSing, like so. Like if I get weak at all, I just de-aggro from the situation completely. Because yeah, I might have been 60-70% HP, but imagine an acolyte throws an aid. Then that will kill me from that, because I wouldn't have the time to react to get out of the exploit zone. And then if I do, then if I fell out of the zone, then it could be a wipe. I would have to start doing invis and stuff on the arena. But that was the solo completion on it. As I say, I apologise that the first 10 minutes was cut out. It doesn't matter. It made my life easier editing the video anyways. So that was the run. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.
That'll get better. He thought he'd lost you for a long time. I haven't seen him like that since he vanished into the infinite forest.
Is that the exo? I could show you how to remove that